Welcome back to CrossKeys. We're looking forward to tasting some of our new sparkling wine with you guys this week. Thank you guys so much for all the support you've been giving us. We've really had a great time diving into the library with you. It gives me a chance to see some interesting wines that we might have forgotten about. And so next week on My Demanding, we are really looking forward to some of our reserve wines. These are the wines that we knew were special going in, and now they've had some age on them. So it's really an interesting chance to taste some of really what we considered special. So please, until next Friday, we still have the free shipping with the promo code SPRING on our website. So please order your tasting bottle kit as soon as possible. We'll be tasting our Double X, which is a wine that, very small batch wine that I hid in the cellar with some extended aging. And managed to kind of keep it out of everybody's mind for two full years before we kind of brought it to light and realized, to present it as this is a very special wine that we had a lot of promise with, and we're really excited to now release it at its peak maturity. And then also the Viognier Reserve, that is a result of some experimentation we did when we first started making Viognier here. We found a method that really produced an interesting wine and very special. So this is our first reserve wine that CrossKeys ever did. And then also our Tavern, which is the port style dessert wine in the 2012 out of our library. So port is one of those wines that can literally age for 100 years. So maybe 8 years we'll start to develop some of those interesting things. So please order for next week, and I look forward to tasting those with you. On the big exciting news is next Friday we will be opening. So we're very excited to have everybody back. Please call. It'll be reservations required to come visit, and we have plenty of space here, lots of room outside, plenty of distance, but we'll definitely have bottle and food purchases available. And like I said, call ahead, check the website, keep in touch on social media, and you'll see exactly what to expect. But we're looking forward to having you guys back out here and enjoy some of this beautiful weather. So what's been going on around here is we had another frost event last weekend, and definitely was not quite as cheery as the last round. We definitely saw some damage, but on the good news is all the sleepless nights really did pay off. Our damage is quite minimal. We're very excited how we came through. So I appreciate all the warm thoughts you guys sent, and I'm sure, hopefully, I think if you probably woke up in the middle of the night and felt the chill, hopefully at least a few of you send a warm thought my way. Seeing what we do for frost here. But let's not beat around the bush, let's get into it. So Nouvelle, this is our very first sparkling wine, and the name was arrived at based on a region in France that had problems with phylloxera. It's an insect native to the United States in the 1870s and 1880s. Anyways, they started to plant resistant vines, and one of those was the Vidal Blanc, which is one of the grapes that we grow here. So this region had some history with that. We like the name, it means new. We thought it was going to be a good launch to our sparkling wine, and it's made up primarily of Vidal Blanc. And with our beautiful backdrop, the Vidal Blanc's right over there. So we're close. It's good to drink wine close to where it comes from. Woo! I might have shaken it up a little bit.
I took it off the perfect time.
That's all right. Good. So I guess that's a handy tip for those at home if you're curious about sparkling wines. The colder, the less likely they are to foam. And then the other thing is always pull that cork out nice and slow. And you saw when I got it to the top, I kind of held it on there just to make sure it died down a little bit. So the wine's freshly bottled. It hasn't quite settled down yet, but it means it's got the bubbles, and that's what we're looking for. So about how Nouvelle was made, sparkling wine. When we say traditional method, that refers to method champenois, the way they make champagne in the region of Champagne. we can't really call anything champagne in the United States. The French get really angry with Americans when we do that. So we're forced to always say sparkling wine or traditional method. But this isn't traditional method. This is called Charmant. So this is a wine that was made still, just like we make any other wine. It's picked a little earlier, the alcohol's a little lower, and then we blend it to taste. But before it's been carbonated, it's quite acidic, and it's not necessarily the most appeasing wine, but that's what makes it interesting to make, because you have to imagine into the future that once it gets the bubbles, it's going to change entirely how it acts and how it tastes. So this wine was made in tank, and then we put it into a very specialized tank that can take pressure, and we force carbonated it with CO2. So that's the Charmant method. The traditional method is actually you would put a little bit of sugar and yeast into that wine and then put it in a bottle. And then that would actually cause a secondary fermentation. That's where the bubbles would come from. But it's a very long and intensive process. It requires a special riddling, so all of the solids, all the yeast come out of the wine. Very difficult, but we want to do that. We're looking forward to starting that process with our Blanc de Noir, our second sparkling wine, at the end of this month. So this is kind of the introductory, the fun wine. This is the Nouvelle, the sparkling wine to celebrate any occasion, not just special occasions. And you see I have 2 tasting glasses here. The flute for champagne is a relatively modern invention, only a few decades old. And the reason that it's become fashionable to drink champagne or sparkling wine out of a flute is that it helps contain the bubbles. It means the bubbles will last a lot longer inside the glass. But it does not provide you necessarily with the aromatics and kind of the sensory experience that would be ideal for the wine. So there's nothing wrong with the flute, especially if you want those bubbles to stick around and you really like the carbonation. But to get the full effect of the wine, it's interesting to try them side by side. And so out of the flute, it's relatively neutral. It doesn't smell bad, but I don't get kind of that great characteristic that I was getting out of the fruit when it was still a still wine. But then if you can compare that to something with a little bit more of an open bowl, that's when the Granny Smith apple, light pineapple, kind of those characteristic Vidal Blanc fruit aromatics come. And so if you want to know truly the smell of the wine, it's always better to taste it out of a bigger glass. So one thing I talked about when we pick it is how it's a little underripe and a little acidic, so it can be quite abrasive on the palate. Now that finds good balance in the wine once the carbonation is added, and so the result is this wine that has a really wonderful acidity to it. We do balance it out with a little bit of residual sugar, so we take a portion of the Vidal Blanc, we pick it when it's really, really ripe, and then we ferment it until, we don't ferment it all the way dry, so there's still some sugar in that Vidal Blanc, and that wine tends to be really fruity, really intense tropical flavors, a little bit of the brown spicy notes to it, and then also quite sweet. And so my job before we carbonate it is to blend those two together until we can balance the acidity, the sweetness, and the fruit, and the texture that we're looking for in the wine. And then, so what's funny though is that to taste it or to anticipate it with the carbonation with the bubbles, I need to try it with the bubbles. And the way I do that is I use a stem for a bicycle tire that I've retrofitted onto a plastic 2-liter bottle. So I'll chill the wine down really cold and then hook it up to CO2 just like you're pumping up the air in your bicycle, and shake it until eventually it gets CO2 in it. Now that's not, we don't use bike pumps or plastic bottles in the manufacture of our normal wine, so don't worry. But that is a kind of a fun, you'll see me sometimes shaking up a plastic bottle of wine. Definitely not the most elegant way to do it, but it is a very convenient way to kind of see into the future when it comes to carbonation. And we're back. So it's after we make those decisions and we do the blending, one other thing that's important here is Some of the Charmant we have on the site we use for this as well. Charmant can be difficult. It can dominate the nose, so this has only got about 9% Charmant in it. It does bring a nice floral component to the wine, but you really have to be careful when you're blending in the Charmant, because we want that Vidal Blanc to shine through. We just want to give it a little bit of added complexity with Charmant. It's quite well carbonated. We can really dial that in with this process. That's one of the attractive parts of the Charmant method, is that we can decide exactly how much CO2 we want to get in the wine, how much carbonation it has. So this is carbonated to about 4 bar. So it's about 60 psi, which is a good dose, but you can find some traditional stuff is even higher. It can be up to 80 psi. So we like this because it makes it a little bit rounder. It's not quite as sharp. When you put the CO2 in solution, it can also increase acidity. So it's a lot of balancing acts. You know, you essentially have a finished wine, and then you make a whole new wine out of it once it's in the carbonation stage. It's delicious. Like I said, what makes this wine really special is that acidity. It's balanced with the sweetness. It's definitely a wine that can be drank totally alone. This is one of those, you know, whenever someone has decent sparkling wine or good sparkling wine, and they're making mimosas out of it, it always makes me cry a little bit. I love the mimosas as much as the next guy, but that's something for bad sparkling wine, not good sparkling wine. So this one, if you're thinking about a mimosa, I would say maybe you get some orange juice and just kind of wave it over the top of the glass and then put it aside and drink the wine like it is. So maybe a mimosa in spirit. I think it's completely balanced on its own. It has enough sweetness that, you know, it doesn't really need any additions to it. That said, sparkling wine is for celebration. If you want to put orange juice into it, maybe some frozen raspberries, that would absolutely be, I think, complement it very, very nicely. So food pairing with this, we made this wine so you don't need to pair it with food. This is really, you know, whatever it is. If you manage to change the tire on your car, if you did your laundry, you know, that's the type of thing this wine is for celebrating. It's a fun wine for all the time. You don't have to think too hard. You just need to enjoy it, and hopefully it's quite enjoyable that way. That said, nice cold sparkling wine really pairs well with any time you're outside and it's hot. Now that the weather's warming up, it's very versatile in how it pairs. Sometimes you worry about white wines getting overpowered by certain flavors or textures, or, you know, a burnt piece of meat or anything like that. But the CO2 and the acidity in this wine, sparkling wine specifically, are really good at cutting through anything else. So it's a great palate cleanser. You can go from, you know, it'd be like if you're eating barbecue, you take a sip of this, it'll be like your next bite is the very first bite of barbecue you had. So it pairs well, but it's not so overpowering that it couldn't also go with a lighter, you know, shrimp dish or something like that. So really a versatile wine, really made to enjoy, and I hope you guys do enjoy it. We'll talk more in the future a little bit as we start to get our Blanc de Noir, the serious, the traditional method sparkling wine. But we're really happy that we're able to provide this for you guys now. So thank you guys so much. Remember, still free shipping until next Friday for the tasting of the reserve wines, my special wines. And we look forward to seeing you here next Friday when we open back up. Please call ahead for reservations. Keep in touch on social media and our website. Thank you.